In this episode of Man versus Marriage, I got a question for you. Well, for me too, but for you, Jeannie, and you, Quincy. We'll be right back. Welcome back to another episode of Man versus Marriage. It is I, the Q-Diggity Dog, in the Moran family studio with my lovely wife, Jeannie Moran. Jeannie, what's going on?
I don't know. I'm waiting to find out. You said you had a question for me.
You know the question. I preloaded you with it. It's not like one of those episodes.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, say hello to the world.
Hello, world.
What up, world? How you doing? I guess we just got caught on the hot mic talking sexy talk, so that was funny. It's funny.
At least you know it's a healthy marriage.
True that, you. True that. If you are brand new to the program, or maybe you forgot, the email address to get in contact with Jeannie and Quincy is quincy@mvsmpodcast.com. And also, don't forget to check out our apparel line. Go to quincymoran.com /apparel. That's what it'll look like right there. And go pick up some of our fashion, some of our swag, some of our, what do they used to call that?
Clothing.
Yeah.
Apparel.
Clothing, but there was something else. Some of our, I don't know. Go pick it up. We got shirts. We've got hoodies. And soon enough, we'll have probably more. But go ahead and grab that and wear it out into the ethos, because people are always reading shirts. So as much as I travel, or as often as possible, or when I go to the gym, I typically wear something, Man versus Marriage, Family Famous, etc. So it piques people's curiosity, because number one, I want an amazing marriage. And number two, I want to be able to impact people to do the same. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, I don't want anybody to ask me questions. Hey, get outside of your comfort zone. We're here to help people. We're helping you. You go help somebody else. And even if that help is just saying, yeah, I listened to this podcast and it really helped me change my life. It's helped improve my marriage. So why don't you check it out? It's just that simple. Would you say, honey?
Sure.
Excellent. Now, if you are brand new to the program, I want you to know who it is you are listening to. And this is a couple, myself, my wife, Jeannie, married for 25 years and counting. We have 8 children. We have 1 boy, 7 girls. We have a set of triplets, and we have a set of twins. And we have had quite an adventure, if you couldn't tell so far. And when I say that, I mean, we got married very young, and we had hopes and dreams and big plans. And then life happened. And after our first child, things just really got crazy, which if you have one kid, having one child will just completely and totally change your life.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it turned into a significant level of struggle, what we would call survival, at about the 10-year mark. And so at that time, we had gone through, like, both sets of multiples had to spend time in the NICU, and that's tough as a parent. And then we had significant medical issues outside of that with our 2 of our children that were born with hydrocephalus. One had a crazy reaction to a chickenpox vaccine, and then one of 3 of our kids were diagnosed with autism. I was going to go a little deeper there, but I decided not to. 3 of our children, our 3 oldest, have been diagnosed with autism to a varying degree. And also during that time, we found ourselves under extreme financial duress. Babysitters had been molesting our children, and we were getting ready to lose our home. We were eating out of a food bank from a church, and life was just not what we had imagined it to be. So what we decided to do is make our marriage great again. And that is the truth. We got some help from Coach Rita. And after about 10 years of that, coaching, developing, and that journey, I started this podcast because I wanted to introduce Coach Rita to the world. And I also wanted to encourage other men that if we can do it, if Jeannie and I can do this, there is a high probability that you and your wife or you and your husband can do this if you are willing, because that's the one thing that was very vital for us. So now, after the last 15 years, we have learned a tremendous amount of tools and strategies, and we've learned a lot about each other too. Mm-hmm. My wife is a California girl, and a couple of years ago we moved her and our entire family to Texas. So we know a thing or two about a thing or two. And that's the people that you're talking with today. We don't have a college degree in psychology or anything of that nature. No. We have a double master's degree in life.
Yeah.
And that life has been so long that Jeannie is now yawning with an energy drink in her cup. So
you're monologuing.
I am monologuing.
You ever notice that? Every time I yawn on this thing, it's when you're monologuing.
Well, it's not my problem. It's not my problem that you can't receive greatness while it is being dripped upon you.
I think I don't know. I've heard our story a lot. I've lived it. I need to keep rehashing our story. But then again, I do have to keep rehashing our story, don't I?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't want you to dwell where you came from, but there are, billions of people really, but thousands upon thousands of people that listen to the podcast that don't know it. So
that's fair.
It's imperative that I tell it every time, even if it bores you to tears. I'm okay.
I'm just giving you crap.
And I'm okay. Give me the crap. And as a matter of fact, on the next show, you tell the story and see if I yawn.
No.
Okay. Well, then shut your face. I like that. All right. With that being said, today I've got a question for all of us, not just for you, Jeannie, not just for me, Quincy, not just for you, the listener, not for all of you, Jacks and Jills, that we help in your relationship and in your life, but everyone. And this was taught to us by the mighty and powerful Bill and Rita Enos, our pastors and our marriage coach is. And the question is, why do you do what you do? And it's a loaded question, because I think a lot of times you get caught up into this thing. Well, it'll be like, say I have some very annoying habits, which is totally not the case. You might hear somebody say when I'm not around, oh, how do you deal with that? Oh, that's just Quincy being Quincy. Mm. Can you think of anybody in your mind that you have to say those things about? Well, it's likely people are talking that way about you and your weird habits. But the point of it is to go deeper than that. And the point of it is, why do you do what you do doesn't just qualify for what your outward action is, but it also qualifies for your internal dialogue. Honey, what is internal dialogue?
What you say about yourself inside your head.
It's true. Do you think your internal dialogue has anything to do with your overall persona, the peace or chaos that you have going on in your life?
Yeah, I would imagine so.
That was what they call a softball question in the industry. And the fact of the matter is absolutely and yes. We can give you various examples of this. Oh my Lord, she's yawning again. What is this? What's in this cup?
That's Dr. Pepper.
Ew. Sick. It doesn't taste like Dr.
That's
Pepper.
because there was a little tiny bit of the energy drink in the bottom of it.
Yeah. That sucks.
What's your internal dialogue now?
I can't say it out loud because I don't swear.
Yeah, right. That's what you have me for.
I'm here for many things, and I'm glad you're here. So with that being said, not to get too supernatural or too spiritual or whatever you call it, but your life is a manifestation of the conversation that goes on in your mind. And there are many people. I don't want to say many. There are several people I know of. I just can't quantify the number of many. Several's a little closer, but there is like a Joe Dispenza, Jim Quick, Ed Milet, even Andy Frisella.
Who's the other one? Brendan.
There's Brendan Bouchard. There's also, I said Dr. Joe Dispenza, right?
Mm-hmm.
Darn, I forgot the other one. Interrupting myself. Oh, Dr. Caroline Leaf. She talks about it as well. Let me get slightly scientific on you for a minute, and if you, the listener, cannot yawn, that'll be fine. Jeannie's just going to continue to yawn because I'm monologuing.
It's not because you're monologuing. Jeez, I was just teasing. Sensitive.
So sensitive. Want me to make you forget about that figure? Name the movie.
Major Pain.
Yeah, that's my girl. Ooh, girl, you know about it. All right, let me get slightly scientific on you. And this is open discussion, which I'm going to put in the show notes or in the title. But let me help you understand what was mind-blowing to me, all pun and no pun intended. Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about something in the brain called dendrites, okay? And dendrites are physical matter that are created by your mind, if you will. So these dendrites, as your mind conceives things and you go through your day-to-day life, this physical matter develops in something that looks like a tree.
Joyce Myers calls them broccoli, but yeah. Yeah,
broccoli tree dendrites is what they are. And so what happens is, you could say in a literal sense, there is fruit that grows on that tree. What they do is they release chemicals in your body, and these chemicals compel you to do the things that you do. So whatever these trees are made out of, whatever these dendrites are made out of, whatever the physical manifestation of this matter is in your brain, is what kind of dictates your day-to-day life. And that is built over time. It is built with energy. It's both positive and negative experience. And what you continually reinforce is what solidifies and causes these trees to grow. That's why it is so hard sometimes for you to break free from the habits you have, because your body and your brain is a system. It's a living organism, but it is built like a system. So you see people who have and let me, for the record, that is my best explanation of what it is. There is a scientific explanation that you can go look at. And if I got anything wrong, it is Quincy at mvsmpodcast.com. But I definitely wanted you to know that. And why is it relevant? It's relevant because the chemical makeup of those dendrites is what's running through your mind. And here's a true to life example. Would you like to give an example of your situation or any story first, or you want me to keep talking?
No, go ahead, and then I'll bounce off of you.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out where you're going with all of it. Go ahead.
No worries. So here's the deal. At 5 years old in 1983, Pete and Debbie were on a path for divorce. We were in Adger, Alabama. I was sitting at my Aunt Linda's house. I can vaguely remember what was going on. But I know that, my brother and I couldn't go outside and play. We had to sit on the couch, and we had to wait and wait and wait. And finally, we ended up in the back of or I ended up in the back of a station wagon. My mom's in the front seat crying. My sister, who's about 3.5, 4 years older than me, she's in the middle seat crying. My brother's crying, I presume, because those two people are crying. My grandfather's in the driver's seat, and somebody pulls up, gets out of the truck, walks up with 3 paper bags of candy. What I would later know as candy, but 3 paper bags, and hands them off to us. And that's my dad. He just shows up at the last minute before we pull out of town. He brought us some candy and whatever it was in the bag.
I was gonna say candy for a 2-year-old. That was pretty.
I was 5, but
I know, but Josh was 2.
okay. So he got candy. What's the big deal?
No big deal. It was just interesting.
And then as we drive away, my dad is just standing there, and we drive away. We're gone. We leave. And so that did something to me that day, and I did not realize what it did. It wasn't until I got, what is Julia Guglia's book?
Dream I Dare You.
Dream I Dare You. Thank you very much. Julia Gentry. It's not Julia Guglia. I'm just a big fan of the
It's just our thing.
Yeah. So follow me here. She starts digging into your past and why your past is driving your present and your future. Again, that's my paraphrase of it. So I start digging into this thing, and I'm trying to figure out, why am I such a people pleaser? Why do I feel like I don't matter? And why do I feel like I am not good enough? Why does that narrative drive me? Why is it, no matter what I do, it's like I couldn't get rid of it? And, through my intentional thought, through kind of looking through my life and trying to go back and figure out where I was anchored, that's the moment that I came to. That's the moment where I was like, okay, Mom and Dad, why don't I matter enough for you to stay together? Why am I not good enough for you to fight for us, for our family? Now, neither one of those things are true.
No, had nothing to do with you.
And that's exactly the case. Their divorce had nothing to do with me. But for some reason, at 5 years old, I figured out how to personalize that. Because as a 5-year-old, you're a little human being. There's a lot of experience you don't have, but you absorb a tremendous amount of your environment. And so for years, that was a driving factor in me. It's like, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be good enough. That got reinforced with religion.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, the same faith that I follow today is the faith I followed then, but I had a misconception of what that was. And when you couple that, I'm not good enough and I don't matter, that can create a toxic mindset. And then anything perceived as a strength, or any character or any skill that is a strength for you, you can overextend whatever that part of yourself is, and it becomes a weakness. So that's where we learn the phrase that strength overextended becomes a weakness. So that is what helped me get to the root of these issues I had created in my life from that moment in time. I was stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
I did not understand why I did what I did. Why was I doing what I did? I was never intentional about it. I just figured that's the way I am, and that's just the way I'm always going to be. I didn't realize that who I am is not who I have to be. So there is a process by which you can, once you identify the things that you are doing in your life that are not positive, that do not positively impact you. And obviously, if they're not positively impacting you, they are not positively impacting the people around you. They are not enriching the relationships of the people around you. So it's through that when you become aware of it, you can start to begin to resist the operating system. You can start to pull those dendrites up by the root. I don't know the time frame. I don't know the terminology. I don't even know exactly how to tell you to get there, which when you're talking, maybe I'll look it up. But that
On how to get where
on
to
how
the memory.
to basically how to pull those dendrites up by the root or how to remake them into a more positive brain matter.
Okay, so there's a couple things you can do for that. For one, I would go look up Joe Dispenza on YouTube. There's a video that he's doing an interview with another podcaster that I've been listening to on repeat for. I've listened to it probably 3 times a day for the last few days, just because it's a lot of information and it's very difficult for me to absorb it all in one shot. I'm not real good at listening to podcasts, but it's on YouTube, so you can watch the video too. The podcast he is on is called Know Thyself. I do not know who the podcaster is. You might be able to look that up.
I'll check it out.
But there is a specific episode. If you look up the Know Thyself and the Joe Dispenza episode, they're sitting on a stage. There's a room full of people sitting on a bunch of couches. And you have to take it with a grain of salt. If you are a religious person, take it with a grain of salt, because he does talk about universe. He does talk about energy. He does talk about things that some people in the religious spectrum get a little flustered with. Essentially, if you look at it from the perspective of universe is God, you can pretty much, and energy is Holy Spirit, you can pretty much flow with whatever he's got going on and you'll understand it. But he talks about how your memories don't just root in your mind, it roots in every cell in your body. So take for example, like when you go on your drive. When I drive to take kids to school, when we first moved here, I have the exact same path every single time. I'm a creature of habit. So there are days where you might be driving somewhere and you might get deep in thought and you zone out, but you still manage to get where you were supposed to go, as if you didn't pay attention to everything because you were deep in thought, but your body continued on with what it knows and the path that it's ingrained in your memory. Same thing happens with memories, good or bad. And what happens is those emotions attach to that memory. So your body responds, your emotions respond. So this is why people have trouble when they're triggered by something, because it pulls up a familiar thing and your body immediately offloads the same endorphins, the same chemicals, and it reacts as if it was in the same situation that originally caused you to have that trigger.
Yeah.
Even though it's not the same situation, it's not the same thing. So he talks about, in a very scientific manner, I am not that eloquent, ways that you can undo those emotions, undo that memory, so that you can retrain your body to not respond and react to certain things in that manner. Like I said, I don't have the exact terminology for it.
Well, I think that's less relevant, because I encourage you, and I'll look for the links to those podcasts and I'll put them in the show notes.
He has several with Ed Milet where he goes through it too, which are a little easier to follow because Ed asks 50 questions that the other guy doesn't. The other guy just lets Joe talk, whereas Ed kind of pokes back and
Ed digs in from a layman's perspective. He likes to break things down to make them practical and actionable, which can be tough when you listen to Dr. Dispenza. The same thing with Dr. Caroline Leaf. Like when I listen to Jordan Peterson's book, I speed it up because he tends to talk slowly.
I love him to death, but if you listen to him on his normal tone, I'll fall asleep.
I love his work. But with Dr. Caroline Leaf, it's important for me to slow her down because she's South African. She speaks at 150 miles a minute. But, it looks like just food for thought. Andre Ducum, that's the Know Thyself podcast.
So this particular episode that I sent you to, I've just recently started watching it. The reason I'm listening to this one is because he asks Joe a question and says, these are the things that we're interested in learning. And then they just give Joe the floor. And it's a little more um, commonplace conversation for Joe as opposed to when he's on with Ed or other people and he gets very scientific. But I also think it's because this is later in his work. And when some of the podcasts that he's on with Ed were kind of in the beginning because he goes through his testimony. This one doesn't tell his testimony. It's just the process of how you change your behavior and how you change things that you can do. It's a process type conversation, but he'll get through, a few minutes and then the guy will say, okay, now what about this? And he'll ask another question and then he'll give Joe the floor. So there's no real back and forth. With Milet, there's back and forth. He asks questions that maybe you're thinking so that the listener kind of gets more information. So it just depends on what style you listen to better, if you're looking for just kind of an open conversation or if you're looking for a Q&A with a little dig deeper. I would go with Ed.
Yeah, I like some of his earlier work because he talks about the ability to do these clinical trials to see actual brain activity.
So now they're down to this one that he's talking about, or the one that I've been listening to. They are now down to a 7-day trial where if you do these practices on a consistent basis for 7 days, you can reprogram the body and the brain to start go into. So it's a little more, it's a little more in depth than what he was doing before. But like I said, it's more laid back, which I like because the scientific-y talk, if that's even the word, my brain kind of zones out in certain places. So
yeah, it's not information that we compute on a daily basis. But so I want to define this for you, and I didn't really intend on the podcast going this direction, but since we're here, I'll do that, and then we'll clean it up a little bit. But it's when you look up dendrite, dendrite, it's a noun, and it has to do with physiology. It says a short branched extension of a nerve cell, along which impulses received from other cells at synapses are transmitted to the cell body. So that is what we were talking about. Like, this communicates to the cellular membrane, and that's where your cellular memory is housed. But it is through these dendrites that the physical matter that is built by your nerves, etc., that's the physical matter by which your body operates. It is sending the messages to your cells. That's how critical this stuff is. And I'm not trying to get like new age or, way out in left field or anything, but I think it's important to talk about some of the things that we have learned in order to start to change the dynamic of who we are. Because I live by the code, I developed this as I was changing my own life, is who you are is not who you have to be. But it's not good enough to stop there, because that is just a concept. You have to create a plan and walk the plan out daily, not for like a day or two, not for a year or two, but the new path that you put yourself on, you have to be committed until you go to the next life. And it doesn't mean that's the exact direction you're going to go, because you're going to start to learn more about yourself. You're going to start to get set free of things like in my past that had me anchored. You're going to start to learn how you can better impact people through the experiences that you gain. So who knows what the end of the journey really looks like. But in order to do that, in order to connect with your spouse, in order to change your life, there is a significant part of transformation that needs to come from the mind. And so you have the mind, and then you have the action with the body. Now, if you're a man or a woman of faith, you will realize that the Bible talks a lot about your mind. In the Apostle Paul, in writing the letters to churches, he would talk to them, about the things that they think, that you are who you think you are, and that you need to be renewed. Like, your mind needs to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, or that's how your life gets transformed. So what you see is there can be legitimate reasons for the way that you are. Okay, if you've had serious issues in your life, if you have had trauma, if there has been a serious life event like a
Doesn't
divorce or a death.
necessarily have to be that big. I mean, going through the Julia Gentry book, mine went back to being told that I needed to be quiet all the time. I need to take a breath. I need to stop talking. It caused me to not have a voice because I wouldn't answer questions in school. And nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I'm supposed to be quiet. It caused me to not speak up for myself when things were wrong because what does it matter? No one wants to hear what I have to say. It doesn't necessarily have to be a major traumatic event. Sometimes it's just things that we heard or were taught or we learned to use as a coping mechanism. Sometimes those are the things that I think create the baggage too, because like I said, my parents weren't divorced, but the two things that matter most to me is feeling like I matter and feeling safe and being heard. Those are my three main things. Okay. From a young age, I was constantly told to shut up, stop talking, be quiet, seen and not heard. Okay. I took that message. And then the stability issue, I think, stemmed from my parents because although my parents never divorced, there was always a threat. There was always the conversations between myself and my sister. Well, if they split up, who's going with who? Am I going to be with my sister? Am I going to be with with my dad? Am I going to be with my mom? There was a constant walking on of eggshells in my house because you never knew who was going to be mad. You never knew why they were going to be mad. And you were always on guard to see what was happening. Myself, I didn't go through physical abuse. It was present in my home, but not for me. But I still grew up knowing that and seeing that. And it caused me to watch what I did and how I acted and how I said things because I didn't know if it could happen or not.
Yeah, and I understand that, and just so you know, just walking it back a little, my intention is not to make the case that it has to be something major and traumatic.
I wasn't saying that for your benefit. I was saying that for the listeners' benefit because I don't want people to just get hung up on the big stuff.
Well, in saying that, I also want to say what is big for me may not be a big deal for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is true as well. Your parents' intention does not equal your perception.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can perceive a situation without having knowledge or experience to be something that it's not. You truly can. Our kids, we did it as kids. Our kids did it.
Yeah, we had one that was really bad about that. Actually,
it's not a perfect science in my mind, but I do know that we do what we see, but there could be a significant amount of things in your life that you're doing and you don't realize it. Another example, which might seem silly, is I grew up fairly poor, living with my dad and also my mom, a single mother trying to make her way. She had the support of her parents, but, my dad was in Alabama, we were poor. And so if we got to go to the movies, it was like, I'm just glad to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at those types of experiences in life to say, hey, we don't have the means to do more than just get you to the movies, and that ought to be enough for you. And Jeannie wasn't raised that way. Jeannie, what they do is whatever you're going to do, it's an event, it's an emergency.
That's ice cream, by the way.
So we would go to the movies, and every time, whether we were late or not, Jeannie would stop by the concession stand and she would get her stuff, and it would irritate me. And I had some odd against her that I didn't realize until we discussed it later, which is, why isn't it's the whole good enough scenario? Why isn't just being at the movies good enough for you? Why do you have to have the rest of this? And then I had to take a step back and go, wait a minute. We don't go to the movies all the time. When you go, it should be fun. And truthfully, I like the way you think about it more than I like the way I think about it. Because it should be an experience. It should be something that you enjoy. And, you could hear our kids talk about it now, that they enjoy going to the movies, and, they want popcorn, etc. And so what I perceived as we grew up, or what I saw, I developed and operated out of a fear of lack. So when we did get to go somewhere, it's like, well, this is good enough for me because I'm just happy to be here. It ought to be good enough for you. And when you don't look at it that way, or you don't act that way, now I get resentful towards you because you want X, Y, or Z, or you are taking this the wrong way, when really it was a toxic mindset on my side. Not necessarily anybody's fault, but my perception of what happened, whether it was reality or not, my perception became a part of my operating software, if you will. Actually, that'd probably be operating hardware, but I might have the terminology wrong. So that's where this question, and I believe that's why Bill and Rita just continually ask, why do you do what you do? So when you and your wife get into an argument and something sounds familiar that you thought you guys already solved, and you act in such a way that is not positive, or it's not
helpful,
you act in such a way where it doesn't work towards reconciliation, like you don't work to resolve the situation, you get emotional, maybe you get petulant, that's when you know that you're doing what you saw and you're not doing something intentional. Because no matter how you act, unless there's a fire in the house, that means we have to get out of here with haste, and you're screaming for a good reason, and I need to get you out of here. Unless that's the case, I don't have to participate in whatever you have created. I don't. It doesn't mean I can't be empathetic towards it, but it doesn't need to create a response in me where I go on the attack. Because maybe you're not attacking. Maybe you are so full of anxiety that it's overflowing, and you're you're just acting out, but you don't know why you do what you do. So that's where I believe that's one of the tools that is so helpful, in my opinion. And the other reason we're doing a show about this is because we're talking to a listener. We met one of our listeners today that we've emailed back and forth with, but we had a discussion. We had a 1 hour talk, and I felt compelled to bring that forward and say, hey, do you know why you do what you do? And if you don't, it's time to become aware of that. Because in order to redefine your philosophy in life, in order to redesign, the journey and the direction of your life and who you're going to be, you got to know what you're working with. You have to be wise to your mindset when you're going to change, like when you're going to change what it is you're doing, you're going to meet resistance. And I'm not talking about the devil. I'm not talking about your wife. I'm not talking about your kids. I'm not talking about your job. I'm talking about you. You are so habitual at what you do. You can do things without thinking about it, that the moment you start to do something different, you're going to throw a wrench in the whole system. And so you have to understand what that wrench feels like to varying degrees, so that you can resist caving in and continue to push forward and redesign your life. And I know this And I believe I'm articulating it properly. I know this because I had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
This is how, over the last 15 years, this is how I have done it. And like we were talking with Rick and Danielle, it matters what you put in, because what you put in is what you're going to pour out. If you imagine a pitcher, if you pour hot water and there are tea bags in the bottom of it, what do you reckon you're going to pour out?
Tea.
You're going to pour out tea. If you put Kool-Aid in there and just add water, when you go to pour out the pitcher, you're going to pour Kool-Aid out. And I could keep giving these simple, ridiculous ideas or examples, but it's not necessary, because now you know, you, the listener, myself, you, honey, we know what we pour in is what we're going to pour out. And so right now, you know, you have built your life in sort of way, in a sort of way that it may not be serving you. It may not be serving, it may not be helping you progress forward in this thing called life. You may be facing the same challenges all the time. You may be starting a new diet and stopping. You might be starting a routine and quitting. You may be trying to turn over a new leaf and be more patient with your spouse, but you just can't seem to find, you can't seem to find the mojo or the momentum to move you forward. This is where the problem is. The problem is what you've created, your inner dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what is holding you back, because what you believe, what you continually tell yourself, you believe more than the things that you want. And you don't know how to get there. And so the only way to get there is start to fill yourself with something new. And I go back to the Bible. That's why the Bible talks about, you know, the true victory is in the mind. That's where the freedom, that's where liberation happens. So it's imperative to ask yourself this question and start to really just start to observe yourself, you know, as far outside of the box as you can. And when things don't go your way, how do you act? Are you consistently complaining? Are you the complainer in your circle? So do me a favor. No, don't stop. Don't do me a favor. Do yourself a favor and start to observe yourself. And like, one of the things for me is I did not like being so hot tempered. I didn't like giving people control of my emotions. So I had to take those emotions back. I had to learn how to respond rather than to react at everything that I just didn't agree with or things that made me uncomfortable. And that's why I thought it was very interesting. You know, when we had Rick and Danielle on and we were talking about communication, and I could just see in my mind that communication is like a martial art. It's like a discipline, and it's not something that you ever find the finish line to. In disciplines in life, you continue to do them, you continue to refine them, you continue to educate your mind and body in those disciplines. And I was like, wow, that is, maybe it's only deep for party of one, but for me, it made a whole lot of sense.
No, I got what you were saying, because when we were talking to them and we were discussing understanding why you do what you do and understanding why your spouse does what they do, if I don't understand why you do what you do and how you understand things, how you perceive things, I'm going to talk to you the way that I want to be talked to. I'm going to say things to you and communicate to you in ways that make sense to me.
Yeah.
But like Danielle was saying, sarcasm and joking and things like that come easy for her. It's something that she always does. But coming from the other side, if you're joking about something and you hit on something that might be, a deep rooted self-shaming or something that, it if you hit something and you don't know you hit it, you have no clue because you're just playing. You could do damage unintentionally. And then there becomes this wedge and a bitterness because you took a dig, but I didn't take a dig. But to the other party, you did. So knowing that playing that way, she runs the risk of hitting a nerve or upsetting him. She figured out a way to pull that back and change how they communicate. That's the big part, I think, in understanding. I mean, we use it with our kids. Prime example, easiest way for me to explain it. When we started homeschooling, we did it for two reasons. One, I didn't want the kids going into the junior high that was near our house. It didn't have a good reputation. And I was afraid the kids would get lost in the shuffle because they were already being reprogrammed in a way I didn't like. And two, they learn differently. And we started discovering this because one is an auditory processor, one is a hands-on, very kinetic, loves to read, but does not read beyond pleasure. She doesn't absorb. She has to have hands-on. So we brought them home. I had to learn, why are they not learning this? How do they learn these things? What works the best? Okay, so now I know why they do what they do, because one has CP and it messes with the processing system. So she needs everything hands-on, very visual, very tactile. And if you show it to her, she gets it. Once she's got her hands on it one or two times, she gets it. But you give her a math problem on a piece of paper and a pencil, does not work. The other one is an auditory processor. So we learn to read out loud. If you have to answer questions, multiplication tables, she could not pass her multiplication tables and they were going to fail her. And then we discovered she's an auditory learner. Give her the test verbally. She got every single one of them verbally, but on paper, in writing, the wires don't connect.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of that her autism affects. That's a part of what her seizures had created for her. But once we learned this is why they do these things and this is how they need to process information, we took that to heart and we changed everything from life lessons to how they learn school. Everything is put into that perspective now because that's what's necessary for them to learn and understand. I'm trying to make this point to you. And then we get okay, what did you hear me say? We bounce it back and forth.
Yeah.
It's the same concept with your spouse. If I know that you're functioning from a place of wanting to people please and not feeling like you're enough, I now understand why the words of affirmation were such a big deal.
Yeah.
I know why at that point in time you needed to be built up, you needed to be spoken to in a different manner. So it wasn't accusatory, but more, I have a problem. I'd like to help you and I figure it out rather than here, this is your issue. You deal with it.
Let me just jump in there real quick because here's what you learn over time. In the beginning, things are messy, and you're starting to relearn more, to learn more about each other, and to relearn how to engage with each other and how to communicate. Because you're not trying to dumb it down in such a way where your spouse will get it. The goal is to say what needs to be said and for your spouse to hear what you said.
And to not hurt feelings in the process unintentionally.
Yeah. Well, like you made a point, some things you say are going to hurt, but it's a matter of transferring knowledge. If it hurts, there's a reason behind it, but my intention is not to hurt you on purpose. But those things happen early on as you start to rebuild, your relationship, and you start to hone in and train yourselves how to speak, how to communicate. Now, as you develop, you can say things now even very directly, but when you start to transform yourself, what I'll say is this: is that you begin to build resiliency and an understanding in that resiliency that everything my spouse says to me is not necessarily about me. Your spouse could be communicating their own fears, projecting their own fears. So now you take information in as if it's neutral, and then you decide what emotion, if any, do I attach to this. So you learn how to listen logically and then respond logically or emotionally, depending on what the situation is, rather than somebody who's half cocked and just responds emotionally about everything.
Well, what I would say to that is, so when you're learning why you do what you do, okay, you're learning about yourself. Your self-awareness is now your goal. You're paying attention, you're hyper-focused on what you're doing, how you're reacting, how you're responding. As you start learning those things about yourself, you're going to notice, you're going to become more aware about your spouse. Like something's going to be said and you're going to see a reaction, and suddenly you're going to go, oh, I've seen that before. But instead of going after it, now you're just paying attention to it and you're watching to see what made that happen. What can I do to keep it from happening? And it's not a matter of pointing it out to your spouse and being like, do you know you do this? And do you know that's not what I'm saying. Once you start becoming aware of yourself, you start becoming aware of other people. It's kind of a poor example, but it's the best one I've got. We have children with autism. It is very easy for me now in a crowd of people. I will spot an autistic person more than I will spot the guy with the red shirt, just because it's my world. And that person, there's just something about it that I'm very aware of. And my instincts are to, oh, what does that person need? What do they like? What are they smiling at? It's just something about our world that we've become very aware of those things, and we spot it now. So when you're learning about yourself, keep in mind, this is why we're always saying we start with you. We don't start with the couple, we start with you, one individual, because you got to know why you do what you do. You have to understand how you communicate.
Yeah.
You have to know what your needs are and what your love languages are, because without those things, I can't help you learn to communicate if I don't know these basic things, because now I have building blocks. If you know why you do what you do, and you can tell me where that memory stems from or where that action stems from, it gives us a place to say, okay, there's probably a bitterness here, there's probably a hurt here, there's definitely a filter here. So things that are being said are coming at this angle, as opposed to maybe what's meant to be said, because you are internally kicking your own ass for something that other people are not aware of. So our job for Quincy and I, as coaching and helping, is how do we get you to stop beating yourself up over something that you probably shouldn't even own? And how do we get you to start hearing people for what they're saying, as opposed to what you think they're trying to tell you because of what's going on internally? It sounds really complicated, but when you really start getting into it, it's not. I mean, when we did the Julia Gentry thing, at first I was scared to death to do that thing. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to go into the iceberg. I don't want to know what's in there. That's a bunch of crap that I have been sitting on for 25 years. And then when we started getting into it, that memory of being told to shut up, be quiet, children are seen and not heard, going to church, you don't talk. If you talk, somebody's going to swat you or pinch your leg because you're supposed to be listening. Things of that nature. Always being on guard and not knowing what was going on in my home, because my home, to me as a child, was volatile. Not because I was in any danger, but because I never knew what I was walking into. And I didn't know. I based my behavior on what the person coming through the door was acting like. Did he have a bad day today? Was he going to be in a bad mood? Did he go straight to the garage? Did she come in and go straight to the kitchen and ignore everybody? I paid close attention, and that's how I adapted. The other one was the needing to know that I matter. When you're a kid and you're doing these, I mean, I didn't do a lot of activities. I did band, big deal. But when an AA meeting meant more, because it was a stag meeting, so he had to go to the stag meeting, but he didn't want to come to my concert, I didn't matter. If I had a sick day and I needed to stay home and, my mom had to go to work, I didn't matter. Now, that's not necessarily the truth,
Right.
but as a child, that's how I perceived it. I was left home alone, 9, 10 years old with a couple of VHS tapes and some instruction on some medication. She'd call me every few hours. It didn't happen often because I was young. My mom only worked a couple blocks away, but it was still the perception of a child. I didn't matter.
Yeah.
If I had something to say, if we were trying to discuss something and it was, well, who wants to watch what movie? I would say something and my dad would be like, no, we're going to watch this. Why did I even bother to talk? It didn't matter. My opinion just didn't count. And I started going that way all through school. If I don't voice my opinion, I don't give answers to questions when the teachers ask for it. I don't volunteer for stuff because it doesn't matter. No one's going to listen to me anyway, so it doesn't matter. And when we got married and we started having these issues and started talking with our coach, and Quincy was gone all the time, I didn't understand why you were gone all the time. I just thought you didn't want to be there anymore. So I didn't matter. The family that we created in my mind just didn't matter because I was dealing with stuff and you weren't there. So what did it matter? It doesn't matter to you. It only matters to me. None of that is true.
Right.
But internally, because that's what I had been in for so long, that's right. I mean, look at the church stuff. I'm telling people things that I was going through because this is the person in the church you're supposed to go to tell these things to, and being told, oh, you're wrong, or you don't have enough experience, or, that's, I don't know what to tell you about that. Okay. So because you don't have the answer, it doesn't matter. Get what I'm saying? Those are the things that we process life through. And then you get your spouse and you add to the fact that, when we first married, we have all these things in common. We have the same values. We have all the same things that we like. We have a great time together. This is perfect. We're going to get married. Everything's going to be great. And then you get married and you're like, dude, what are you doing? We don't agree on certain things. We just don't see eye to eye on stuff. We're not talking to each other like we used to. And everybody jokes and calls it the honeymoon phase. No, I don't really think that's it. I think it's that in the beginning, you're having the good time and you're talking about things, but you're not talking about the deep things. You're not going under the surface because you don't need to. And then when you get married, the stuff that's been buried under the surface, all of a sudden, when you get into your first argument or, the power bill doesn't get paid or something happens, there's a trauma of some sort, and all this stuff comes to the top, you're looking at each other going, whoa.
Yeah. And it's not particular to marriage. It is for us because we
I'm just using that as the example.
I agree. We didn't live together before we got married, but the thing is that, and I want to go back and reiterate this because like Jeannie and I as parents, we're not perfect. We've made plenty of mistakes. I believe we always had the right intention, but just because we had the right intention doesn't mean that our kids had the proper perception of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at the things that my parents did. I believe they did the best that they could. And when I revisit the things that were done, the way that they raised me, I now hold them harmless.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were doing what they thought was best. They had the right intentions. I misperceived what it was they were intending to communicate.
Well, you don't have the full understanding of
correct
the situation as a child. I mean, that's why the ongoing joke is, well, I'm the parent and I say so. And the kids are like, but I want to know why. I could tell you why, but you're not at the level to understand the full weight of a decision that might be being made.
Yeah, there's always context to that. And so there are things, I won't say probably, things that you can't hold certain parents harmless for because the actions they take against their kids or the words that they speak to their kids. And the truth is that typically what we've come to understand as typical is that you do what you see.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your parents told you you're to be seen and not heard, you can probably factor in that's what was told to them. And so that is what is being passed down. This is what it is for kids. Now, there is a time where kids are seen and not heard, but there's also a time when kids need to be kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that. So, in my opinion, we're not asking you to think about all the things that were done wrong to you and become a victim. That's not the case. So that's number one on the don't do this list. Don't think of yourself as a victim. Life happens to all of us. And keep this mindset. It was very powerful that we learned from Ed Milet. Life is happening for you. It's not happening to you. And because it's happening for you, you can take the lessons from it and you can make a better life than you have now. Whatever that looks like, you will have to decide. Number two on the things that you don't do when it comes to why do you do what you do? You start to understand yourself better, and now you use this as a crutch or as an excuse to your spouse. Well, this is why I do this, so you can't do this to me, or you can't say this to me. No, that's out of here. Number three, if you take this adventure with your spouse, do not try to psychoanalyze your spouse and jump to conclusions.
Oh, dear God. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Jeannie's spouse didn't do this, but
somebody else did it to me, and
say, well, you are X, Y, and Z, and this is why you're behaving that way. This we take, and look, somebody explained to me in very short order why I'm probably doing what I'm doing with this podcast. And it's because I come from a broken home and my parents weren't married. They got divorced, and that separated our family. And here I am with a podcast that's trying to save families. So yeah, that's a big deal to me. It's one that I'm willing to inconvenience myself for because I know the pain of it. But I want you to know that I totally lost my thought. That's what I left it there. I lost my thought. It's gone. It left. It's going into the wind, sir.
I almost said something, but I'm not going to.
What were you about to say?
I was picturing my last F flying out the window. It's about the same thing.
Now.
That's why I said I wasn't going to say it the way I was thinking it.
Well, I had a place I was going.
It's more colorful than that, but anyways.
I had a place I was going with that, but I legitimately, the thought ran out of my mind. So it may be a situation where.
But let's go back to this. If you're going to go, this isn't something where you're going to be the victim of everything. We don't want you to go all the way back to every little thing that's ever happened to you. The way Julia Gentry did it, and this is how Quincy and I have learned it and have been using it, is try to go back in your mind to your earliest memory. What is it? And generally, you're going to find a conversation, an event, something that happened, and you're going to find the emotion attached to it. And that's going to tell you what it is that you're looking for. That is the core of why you do what you do and how you filter everything in your life.
Yeah, it's what she calls a limiting belief. And so this is the point I was going to make after telling you that about my friend Jacob, who asked me, what's your earliest memory? Anyway, the approach that I take on this podcast, and it's because it's going to resonate with people who are most like me. The guy that I used to be, that's who this is going to speak to, is because I started with me. Where could I take responsibility? And it's that old, tired concept where people say, well, if you're in the airplane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first so you can help other people. And as corny as that is, guess what? It's true. You cannot control things and people around you. What you can control, as Coach Jack would say, is your attitude and your effort. And I took that a step further, and your actions. Those are the three things you can control. So it starts with you. And it's not a let's kick my own butt session like you're talking about, honey. It's just Start to observe yourself and find out why you do what you do. And if there are things that you are doing that you do not like, or you do not feel like make a positive impact on you or the people around you, those are the things that you start to change. You make a plan to change that. How do you do that? Ask me, email me. You see the email right there, Quincy@mvsmpodcast.com. I can tell you how I did it. I should probably do a few more shows on how I've done
We
it.
will.
And one thing that we are working on, just to put a bow on this, is a guide to a great marriage. I was traveling recently and I got into working on this document, which I thought was going to be simple. But if you want to know when this guide to a great marriage is going to come out, make sure that you email me, Quincy@mvsmpodcast.com, so that I can alert you when it's coming. And I'm going to show Jeannie what I've been working on. I think this guide is going to be even better than I ever thought it was, because it's really going to give you step by step, how do I follow this path? How do I walk this journey? And it'll be your version of that journey. And I'm telling you, it will be 12 months to a brand new you. And I don't say that like Weight Watchers or whatever else is out there. I say that with the full confidence that that is possible. And I'm telling you, and I've said this in a couple of podcasts before, the one thing for me that was absolutely game changer was my faith, and is my faith today. So if you do not have faith in your life and you are considering dabbling or looking into faith, use the email address, because that is the secret sauce. That is the magic in the box for the old Q diggity dog. Anything else, honey?
No.
Okay. Well, here's what's cool. I had planned on doing a short 30-minute episode to make you aware of this question. Why do you do what you do? And an hour and 7 minutes later, guess what? You are much more hipply educated on why do you do what you do, or at least strategizing.
If not, you just listen to us babble with each other. It was a good conversation for me.
There was learning in there for me, and I liked it. So, hey, make sure you utilize the email, Quincy@mvsmpodcast.com. What about that guide to a great marriage? Maybe I'll flash that page on here at some point so you can see it. But make sure you utilize the email address so that you know when the guide to a great marriage is coming out, and we can let you know what other really cool things are coming, because I am excited about what's coming in 2025. Also, if you're asking yourself, I wonder what I could do to help Quincy and Jeannie make this podcast platform grow. Guess what? I was hoping you would ask that question. Go to quincymoran.com/apparel. And then you can buy some of our clothing. What?
And then
there is no more and then.
Sorry, I could not get it. It was in my head. I'm sorry.
I know. I type that in emails all the time. So look at quincymoran.com. Go to /apparel. Go check it out. We've got some things on there. I love this flagship shirt. You can actually see I'm wearing it now. It's the Man vs. Marriage podcast shirt. And if you look up there in the right corner, that's the print on the back. It's the official logo. The one that you see here that has it stretched across the front, that is like the secondary official logo. I've got no other words for that. And while you're over there looking at quincymoran.com, you can see this shirt right here, which I really, really like. It says not born ready, built ready. And that is my testimony. That is my testimony in short form. There's also some gear out there for Family Famous, which is coming. We are going, look, I'm telling you, when it comes to this Family Famous, it is going to dramatically change your life, and I am doing what I can to get it ready. But that's going to be the next iteration of Man vs. Marriage, and that's how we're going to connect on a greater level, and we're going to offer you some things to help you become family famous. And finally, Another example of this great clothing line is the Notorious Hustle Mania at quincymoran.com. So that is all for now. Make sure you reach out to us. Share this show with people you know. You know what Annie Frisilla says, don't be a hoe. Share the show. I love that podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that beautiful woman on your screen that keeps moving her chair, leaning out of the picture, yawning when I monologue, snapping the mint box open during the program, playing with tape, drinking her drink, and other things I observed her doing.
I am just me. No matter where I am, I'm going to be me.
She is my lovely wife, Jeannie Moran, and I, the other annoying guy, or the annoying guy on the podcast. That is me, your humble servant, Quincy Moran, and for the Moran family and Man vs. Marriage. This is Man vs. Marriage, the podcast.